So we're going to move on to the next section of the program today, which is our panel discussion. It'll be moderated by Dr. Yu and myself. I'm going to just give you a little, a little background, more sort of formal background on our presenters, or our panelists rather. So Brandy Boatner, who's right there. Brandy Boatner is the Digital Experience Manager at IBM Global Technology Services, where she develops and drives implementation of a C-level client-facing digital experience and engagement model to enhance the way IBM engages with CXOs in the digital world. Prior to this position, she was IBM's external relations professional for over 2 years. Boatner served as national president of PRSSA and most recently held the position of new professionals chair for the PRSA NY chapter. Her expertise includes all social media and digital strategy, integrated marketing, communications, strategic public relations, and corporate communications. Boatner completed a Master's of Communication in Public Relations and International Marketing from Hawaii Pacific University in 2009. So I'll go through and I'll give everyone's bio, and then I'll turn it over to Dr. Yu to sort of explain the format for our panel discussion. Dr. Jennifer Gibbs. Dr. Jennifer Gibbs is an associate professor in the School of Communication and Information at Rutgers University and director of the Masters of Communication and Information Studies program. Dr. Gibbs' research focuses on collaboration and knowledge sharing in virtual, multicultural work contexts, such as globally distributed teams, as well as the use of new communication technologies for online self-presentation and relationship formation. Her research has also won major awards, such as the W. Charles Reading Dissertation Award and the Human Relations Article of the Year Award. Dr. Gibbs currently serves on the editorial boards of Communication Monographs, Communication Research, Journal of Applied Communication Research, Journal of Communication, and Journal of Computer Mediated Communication. She earned her MA and PhD from the Annenberg School of Communication at the University of Southern California. She also studied the globalization of e-commerce on an NSF grant as a postdoctoral fellow at the Center for Research on Information Technology and Organizations at the University of California, Irvine. Dr. Tina McCorkindale, right to my right. Dr. Tina McCorkindale is an associate professor of public relations at Appalachian State University. She has more than 60 conference presentations, and her research has been published in Public Relations Review, Journal of the New Communications Research, Public Relations Journal, Journal of Social Media and Society, International Journal of Nonprofit and Voluntary Sector Marketing, Journal of Hospitality and Leisure Marketing, Teaching Public Relations Monograph, Global Media Journal, Canadian edition, Feedback, and in several books. McCorkindale serves as the editor of the Institute for Public Relations Social Science for Social Media Research Center, and she is the chair for the Public Relations Society of American Educators Academy. With more than 10 years of experience as a research analyst, she has experience with various verticals, including CPG, technology, pharmaceutical, transportation, and financial services. Her research broadly focuses on social media, with specializations in authenticity, transparency, and reputation. And Dr. Lisa Volk-Tuning. Dr. Lisa Volk-Tuning teaches corporate communications as a 10-year line assistant professor at Penn State University as of August 2009. Her research interests are in theoretical and applied perspectives in understanding the role of communication in human organizations and how crisis communication and ICT emphasize the role of influence of communication partner and channels. Tuning worked as a consultant with Johnson & Johnson in their corporate communication department. She has also examined the role of communication networks in organizational recovery with New Orleans business leaders following Hurricane Katrina. Her research has been published in major communication and health journals such as Clinical Transplantation Communication Monographs, Health Communication, Health Marketing Quarterly, Human Communication Research International Journal of Humanities and Social Science, Journal of Communication, Management Communication Quarterly, and Public Relations Review. She has given invited keynotes and presentations at International Communication Association Conference in Seattle, Washington, and Chicago, Illinois. National Communication Association Conference in Washington, New Jersey Communication Association Conference in Madison, New Jersey, Sunbelt Social Networks Conference in Redondo Beach, California, and St. Pete's, Florida. She earned her PhD in communications from Rutgers University in 2009. Dr. Lisa Volk-Tuning teaches corporate communication as a 10-year assistant professor at Penn State University. Her research interests are in theoretical and applied perspectives in understanding the role of communication in human organizations and how crisis communication and ICT emphasize the role of influence and communication partner and channels. She has also examined the role of communication networks in organizational recovery with New Orleans business leaders following Hurricane Katrina. Let's give them a round of applause for all of that. Can we please? I mean, I'm ready to go home. That was fantastic. So let me turn it over to my colleague, Dr. Yu. She's going to explain the format of the moderation, how we're going to moderate and do the panel discussion, and then we'll turn it over to Dr. McCorkindale. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Chris. Good afternoon, everybody. Okay, I hope everyone enjoyed the lunch and also ready for another great session. Okay. Just to give you an idea, I just want to provide you a quick overview of our panel discussion format. First, each panelist will present their studies and project about 10 to 15 minutes. Okay? And then at the end of this session, we will have a Q&A and discussion time. There is a chance you can ask the question or you can add your comments on the topics they will present. Also, I'm going to briefly discuss the topic that will be presented. First, Dr. McCorkindale. The first presentation will be about the state of social media research. Dr. McCorkindale will review the research in social media area and explore where we were, where we are now, and where we are headed. Then Dr. Gibbs and Dr. Tuning will present their social media studies. Dr. Gibbs will discuss about strategic role of social media in internal communication, and Dr. Tuning will share her insight on the impact of social media in community building. Lastly, Ms. Boatner will present the recent trend in social media, okay, which is big data in social media. Okay, I'm very excited for the topics today, and please join me in welcoming our first presenter, Dr. Tina McCorkindale.
So first of all, I wanted to thank you all for having me today. I'm really excited to be here. I think this is a really great program and a really great opportunity to sort of connect academics and professionals. So thank you so much. So what I wanted to do today is to talk about where we are in social media research, but also where we are going. I'm not a futurist, but I wish I was. I think some of the most inspiring presentations I've seen of recent are from futurists. So if you ever have an opportunity to go see a futurist speak, I highly, highly recommend it, because it's a really great thought of where we're going, and that way you can sort of anticipate the needs, which is what we really do as PR people. All right, so just to tell you, one of the ways that I collect information for social media is through the Institute for Public Relations Social Science of Social Media Research Center. I'm the editor of the center as of now. On Tuesday, I was just elected to be the president and CEO of the Institute. Yes, thank you, thank you. So there will be another editor of the Social Science for Social Media Research Center, and it's a real big mouthful. So what we do here, if you're not familiar with it, is we put together a lot of research that's happening on social media. So if you want a place to sort of go get cliff notes for academic articles, this is really the place to do it. We also have some really great blogs that you can check out as well. With the Social Science for Social Media Research Center and the Institute for Public Relations, there's a research journal for the Institute for Public Relations where I wrote an article about the state of social media research. It was just published last year, but I feel it could almost be outdated. And it was the end of last year, so it just tells you how fast things are changing. Even though a lot of topics are evergreen, a lot of things stay the same. So this is the title of my article, so where we are now and what it means for the future of public relations. With social media theories, and what we've seen is various theories that are based on old research that we try to apply to social media, sometimes not as successfully as we should. The big topics that we talk about are engagement, and there's a theory about dialogic communication that Kit and Taylor put together, and that's sort of translated into what engagement is, right? The dialogic communication original scale was based on work with websites. And it's been applied a lot, even by myself, to research itself on social media. And I don't think it translates as well. So if you're interested in doing any research projects, this would be a great area to do it. Engagement and dialogue is really important because I think we've transferred from this model of talking at people to talking with people. And with what we see as the future of social media and engagement, it's going to be a lot more personalization and a lot more necessity to talk with people one-on-one. And I think that we are expecting it now, where before we were a very sort of one-to-many model. It's now a two-way street. And organizations have to prepare themselves and make sure they're ahead of the game. Influence and influencers is also a very popular topic in what people are talking about. There's a lot of debate on specifically how you measure an influencer and whether an offline influencer or an online influencer are the same thing. That if you have a lot of followers on Twitter, does it make a difference with how you can affect people to actually recommend your products and services or buy stock in your company, which is really what you want them to do in the end game. Research has also been conducted quite a bit on transparency and how transparent you are on social media. Transparency and authenticity, more genuineness, transparency, the ability or the way that you present information holistically. I mean, that's a very big summary, but that's what it is. It's a huge buzzword that's thrown around, and I don't know if people necessarily know what it means. So I'm going to just briefly go over and break down. There is a social media measurement standards conclave, which Katie is a part of, your earlier speaker. And what they define engagement is some action beyond exposure, that there is some sort of interaction or exchange between two parties, which is also a lot of what relationships are, that exchange and that relationship between two parties. There's been all sorts of studies that have been presented across different nonprofits, corporations, NGOs looking at dialogue and engagement, but I think it's an area that we still need to work on and think about the ethics of engagement. I think that's very, very important because I feel that sometimes corporations engage with people unethically. And what I mean by that is they engage one-sidedly, not for the purpose of generating relationships, but to put something out there really dumb that you're not really expecting an answer from your stakeholders. So if you have these fake conversations, for instance, you have a company posting, "How are you doing today?" If they don't care for the answer and if they're not sort of reading those, that is unethical to me. And I'm working on a paper for it. Best practices for engagement should always deal with thinking about your end stakeholder and their overall goals to make sure that you are participating ethically and transparently with that organization. Brian Solis, who's one of my favorite people, if you get a chance to watch him or just Google his videos, he's fantastic. And I think it's because he looks at things differently in social media and engagement and really thinking about the end user or consumer. So he has a book called Engage or Die. It's a little dramatic, but it really is not die in the literal sense, but more of dying as an organization, making sure you're staying current and on top of your game. So monologue, what is typically what was done, and even in the early stages of social media research. So I did a study on Facebook from 2008 data, and very few organizations were communicating on Facebook, actually having dialogue. So think about that. That was 7 years ago and how much we have changed since. So now it's not monologue anymore. It's dialogue with stakeholders, which is important. So transparency, Brad Rollins, who's at Arkansas now, he has a great definition for transparency that wasn't applicable specifically to social media, but it can easily be applied. That you're making all legally releasable information available to your constituents. There was a great article that I highly recommend as well by Kevin Stoker that talked about translucency. I mixed them up. Wakefield and Walton. Stoker did something else about ethics and dialogue. Wakefield and Walton talked about translucency. That for practical purposes, transparency should probably be called translucency. Because sometimes if you are fully transparent and you give all the information, it can confuse your stakeholders because they're so overwhelmed with information. So trying to find that balance to make sure you're giving them the information they need to make decisions, but not overwhelming them with esoteric or unrelated information that may not help their decision-making process. What the answer to that is, I'm not sure, and I don't know if anybody else knows either. What research has found is that being transparent increases credibility and trust, right? And I highly suggest, if you haven't, which you probably have, is to read Edelman's Trust Barometer. They talk about who are trusting individuals, and it's also a global study. So not just being US-centric, but looking at the whole across countries and where's the trust and what do we believe in. Academicians are very trustworthy. Corporations are not, right? They're not. So the other people who are the most trustworthy are people like me. You trust your peers quite a bit, more so than anyone else, and you rely on them, and you do this probably in every situation that you're part of. Authenticity. So I had this really great meme for authenticity that you keep using it, but you don't know what it means. And we throw around these buzzwords, I think, quite a bit in social media without understanding them. What I think for what's important here is that an individual's authenticity is in direct opposition to strategic self-promotion. I think that's really important to think about as an organization, because if you're an organization, a lot of what you do is strategic self-promotion. So are you being authentic, right? So it's something to think about. Do I have that answer? No, but think about it. Ethics is another great area of research that is very important. And like I touched on earlier, engaging for the sake of engagement without thinking about the needs of your consumer is not ethical. You always have to think about the needs of your consumer and what they need from you, because if you're only posting things that benefit you, then you are selfish, right? Sort of like in your friends or anything like that. So you have to think about balancing the needs. That doesn't mean that you never put anything that's self-promotional, because as you know, organization-consumer relationships are two-way, but they're necessary, right? I mean, relationships, I'm giving you something and you're giving something back, so making sure we have that relationship is critical. Here's also 4 ethical challenges with social, and there's a list. So looking at advertising, marketing practices, how you're recruiting individuals to making sure you're ethical in that way, and also integrity risk. And that's why a lot of people don't like to use social media, is because they are worried about their integrity, their reputation. But the conversation is happening without you, right? If you're an organization and you're not on social, people are talking about you. So you have to think about that and how you engage with your audience. And you don't determine that. So if you're an organization and you say, we're only going to use our channel to promote our quarterly earnings, that's not happening. If someone doesn't like your product or they're having an issue, they're going to use it for whatever purpose they want. So you have to make sure that you adapt for that and prepare for it. Measurement standards and benchmarking is another great area of research that where social media is. And here's some great references that are a lot of different benchmarking studies. So here's where we are, here's the usage increase, and we track that over time. And what that helps us do is predict, but also think about new emerging technologies that have an impact on the profession. The dictionary PR measurement and research has been translated in, I think, like 7 or 8 languages. So if you need a dictionary of what specific terms are, it's a really great resource at the Institute for Public Relations Measurement Commission puts that together. And there's all sorts of studies on social and what people are talking about on social. Okay, I'm good on time. I think what's really exciting to talk about is where we are going, right? Get ready. Think about how far we've come in 7 years. What will it be like 7 years from now? It will be different, a lot different. So here's what we are seeing. Not only are we just a bunch of targeting groups and general audiences like men ages 18 to 34, right? Or men ages 55 and above. That's this very general, doesn't tell you much. If you have a 21-year-old college student who's a senior, that's very different from a stay-at-home dad, father of 2, who is 31. So putting people into these different categories is going to become more difficult and not give you insight into what you need as an organization, as trying to find out what are the values, attitudes, behaviors, and lifestyles of these demographics that aren't necessarily segmented by what we consider to be our traditional demographics. We are going to see more focus on the personalization and human experience. USAA is rolling out a test of facial recognition to log onto their banking platforms, right? How fantastic is that? There was a great a YouTube video about facial recognition software that you can walk into a store, they recognize your face, they know what you buy, and they approach you. You don't even have to deal with finding somebody. They bring you clothes for you to try on, and they know what your likes and dislikes are, right? So I know, exciting, right? I wish I had that at my house. But we look at the humanization. Chase relaunched their mobile app, and it tells you good morning or good afternoon. It uses your location to provide you with a screen that is near where you are. So if you're in New York or Brooklyn, you get a nice backdrop of the Brooklyn Bridge, right? It's personalizing the experience to learn more about you with the data that you willingly, unknowingly provide to them. There's going to be more of a focus on mobile, more wearable technologies. We're going to have more noise competing for our attention. More automated jobs, I predict, in the future. That things that we sort of take for granted, wait staff, servers, goodbye, right? Because it's just like at LaGuardia Airport. You just have iPads that you can order your own food from, and they just deliver it to your table, right? You'll have the your airline agents who take your tickets, right? We'll go into facial recognition where you just pass by and they recognize who you are. So jobs that can easily be automated, including some journalism jobs. They're testing software to be able to write sports stories without actually having somebody write them. You just put in the data and it automatically populates it. So any jobs that you typically think are very rote, meaning you do the same thing over and over, we will see those to be automated. We are also having technology that's becoming increasingly integrated with our bodies, right? So Fitbits, we have Google Glass, which is, the test is slowing. This is actually a cell phone that you have with your hand. Your hand turns into a cell phone. You will still need your mobile. Your mobile is the platform. This is what's connected to your body. It tells you about the Fitbit, right? It tells you what's going on. You can connect all these different integrations into your body. My students believe, and probably rightly so, that one day we're going to have chips in us where you can easily tell your health history, tell you what you need, and sort of control that for you. You may have this, nomophobia, no mobile phone phobia, that's the name for it, right? The dependency on mobile devices that we have, where people, there's research that shows you have high anxiety if you feel disconnected from your mobile phone, where you can't stop checking it, you leave it at home and you feel like you left a child somewhere, right? So we are going to become more dependent on technology and that experience. The trade-off, though, and this is my last slide before we move on, your privacy. How much are you willing to give up? How much of your health information are you willing to give up? How much of being tracked by organizations are you willing to have, right? You would probably be surprised or not surprised that a lot of information is being collected on you every day with purchases that you make, with where you go, to help personalize your experience. But where does it go too far? If your organization gives you a Fitbit, but also bases your health insurance rate because of your Fitbit, right? Changes what they are prescribing you. So finding that balance between personal and professional with data and privacy is going to get more difficult. So think about those things, because that is really the trade-off, right? How much information are you willing to give? Thank you very much.
I'm thrilled to be here today and have the chance to speak at this really exciting event. I normally speak to academic audiences, so I'm especially excited that we have such diversity here and to get to speak to practitioners as well as academics. So my talk is going to be a little bit different. I think so far we've been hearing a lot about social media for PR purposes and for communication with external stakeholders. I'm really focused on trying to understand how social media can facilitate communication internally within the workplace. And I've done a lot of research on global teams and virtual teams and how they use collaborative technologies to collaborate and communicate more effectively across time, space, and cultural boundaries. boundaries, and I see social media technologies as kind of a progression along that trajectory that may offer some potential for knowledge sharing and relationship building inside the workplace, particularly in distributed work collaborations. So many of you probably work virtually to some extent, or you work with distributed colleagues. But I'm going to focus today on some of the resistance that I've been noticing to using social media tools inside the workplace, as well as the strategic ways that they get used by distributed workers. So. And also, we've been hearing about themes of dialogue and engagement, and my research is really focused on those types of themes, but looking at how to promote dialogue and engagement internally within distributed work teams or globally distributed teams. Okay, so this is, I don't know if you can read this. This is some recent Pew data that looks at social networking site usage and how it's changed over the last few years, just to show how widespread social network site use is in the general population. You probably don't need me to tell you this, but just to see some data, on average, 73% of internet users are on social network sites, Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, etc. And you can see that there's really been a sharp increase over the last 5 years across all age groups, including the over 65 age group. Now, what I think is interesting is that this adoption of social media tools tends to be much higher outside than inside the workplace. So we've had these kinds of tools for almost a decade now, but there's still very relatively little usage of them inside the workplace. In a recent survey of 1,000 executives, only 30% of them said that their companies had adopted social media and found it useful for internal communication. So, I think that's sort of perplexing. Why is it that social media adoption hasn't been higher within the workplace? And by enterprise social media, I'm looking at tools like Yammer, Jive, Facebook just introduced Facebook at work. There's a lot of proprietary tools. IBM used Beehive, which then became Social Blue very effectively for internal communication. But there's also, it may also include public tools like Facebook and Twitter. So in my own research, I've been encountering, I study a lot of different organizations and distributed workers, and I've found there seems to be a lot of resistance to using enterprise social media tools. And there may be several reasons for this. The first one is age, and it's not necessarily what you're thinking. I know there's been a lot of talk about how millennials and now perhaps Generation Z love social media and they'll flock to it in the workplace. Actually, there's been some studies recently that have found that younger and more experienced social media users are actually more resistant to using it in the workplace because they've developed expectations around social media use that are associated with increased open communication, socialization, increased disclosure, and they find that these are incompatible with workplace norms. So there may be a barrier to getting younger people to adopt enterprise social media. Another factor is functional background. I do a lot of research with engineers, and engineers seem to be rather resistant to using social media tools precisely because of the social nature of these tools. We have a lot of quotes. This is one quote from our data. We have other quotes where people said, "I don't do social. I'm an engineer because I like to sit in front of the computer. I don't want to have to talk to my colleagues. Why would I want a social media tool so I could go talk to people further? I don't want to do that." So that suggests that, there are different functional backgrounds that, people who may not want to use social media in the workplace. And then culture plays into it as well. The organizational culture of a lot of companies, I don't think really necessarily supports social media use for various reasons. And national culture may also play in. I've done some research in global teams in which the non-native English speakers felt uncomfortable posting in a public social media forum that was more group-oriented because they felt self-conscious about their language skills, or they felt they didn't want to ask a dumb question in a more public forum. So those are some factors, and I think that this resistance may be due to some very real constraints of enterprise social media. First is the increased accountability, which may be a good thing in some contexts, but there's evidence to suggest that, with social media tools, you're communicating in a more public forum with unknown audiences, and your information is documented. It's going to persist there, and that may deter people from posting things that they don't want to be pinned down on or to come back to bite them later on. Also, there are privacy concerns. A lot of organizational information is confidential and proprietary, and people may not feel comfortable posting it in a public forum. So there's also concerns about the security of the system. There are also productivity concerns. We all know of the publicized cases of employees that were fired for going on Facebook at work, or companies that have policies that ban social media in the workplace because of concerns that they will impede productivity. And then finally, just simply lack of convenience or value. I've talked to a lot of employees who say, why do I have 10 technologies that I'm already using? Why do I need to add a social media tool and have another place that I have to check every day? It's not convenient. Or they simply don't see the value of social media in their work. So in order to try to understand this theoretically, I've been looking at a framework of affordances, which was outlined by Jeff Treem and Paul Leonardi. And in trying to understand what is unique about social media compared to other collaborative technologies that we have, they outline 4 affordances that rank social media as consistently high on. And an affordance is simply a possibility for action. What is it that social media allow us to do? What do they enable us to do? And the first one is visibility. Social media tools make information and people more visible to one another. It's easier to share information and know who's getting your messages. There's also association, which is enabling greater connectedness between people as well as between people and content. So we can visualize our social networks, we can articulate our networks, we can also traverse the networks of others, and in that way we can, we can increase our network value. There's also some other affordances, editability, the fact that most social media is text-based, it's asynchronous, it allows for you to carefully craft the message that you want to send and control and edit yourself. And also persistence, it's documented, it's codified. You can delete a particular post, but it never goes away. So there's content hangs around longer. Now, for the top 2 affordances, they're generally associated with increased knowledge sharing, and there is a lot of emerging literature that really has high hopes for social media and assumes that it will increase knowledge sharing and also help with relationship building in the workplace. Visibility allows for more broadcasting of messages, especially in large distributed organizations. It makes it much easier to communicate to remote employees. And also association allows for the identification of expertise, which is often difficult when you're working in a distributed context. It's hard to know who knows what in other locations. However, these other 2 affordances I see as more strategic and as actually maybe discouraging open communication and knowledge sharing. So the editability, the fact that you can carefully control and craft your persona online may lead to selective self-presentation where people censor themselves or they sort of control how they present themselves and conceal certain information. And also the persistence, this documented nature of content may lead to greater strategic ambiguity where employees are intentionally ambiguous rather than trying to be clear in their communication. Whoa. So overall, the excessive openness, the greater openness of enterprise social media may allow for more strategic uses rather than necessarily more open communication. And I've been studying these strategic uses in some of my research. So I'm going to just, in the remainder of my time, present some findings from a study that was published in the Journal of Computer-Mediated Communication last year. One of my co-authors is here, Julia Eisenberg. And we studied a distributed high-tech engineering firm that was distributed between the East Coast and the West Coast. And we were looking at how these engineers use social media tools to collaborate and get their work done. And we found that they negotiated a number of tensions due to this openness of social media that motivated them to use it strategically. So the first tension that they negotiated was between visibility and invisibility. So they had needs to manage their accessibility to others. They needed to be accessible, but they did not want to be available all the time to others. We found that social media tools enabled remote coworkers to be more visible to one another, which was important because they were working remotely, they couldn't see, they were not co-located, and the tools helped them, but they also enabled them to lurk. There were ways that employees could be intentionally more invisible using social media. And one response was to go invisible on Skype, for example. So one problem that often occurred was the East Coast employees would get bombarded with questions around 6 p.m., which was the end of their workday, by the newer employees in California, where it was mid-afternoon, and they knew they wanted to catch these East Coasters before they left the office. So they would start getting a barrage of questions over Skype chat. And they had a strategic choice to make about how to handle this, but some of them said they would go invisible because they wanted to remain available if there was some urgent request that came up. They wanted to have the flexibility to respond if needed, but they didn't want to feel compelled to respond. And they had the options of choosing do not disturb or not available, which would have conveyed a much more clear message, but might have been off-putting to their colleagues. So they preferred to keep this intentional ambiguity about, their status. And here was a quote from one of the engineers who said, "Sometimes I just go to the Skype icon and select invisible. People may think I'm not online and may not even try to Skype me, or they'll think twice before they message me, like, she's probably in but wants to hide." So in this way, they could remain available while working undisturbed and manage this visibility and invisibility. A second tension that was faced was between engagement and disengagement. And we've been talking today about, the benefits of engagement. We want to promote engagement. Sometimes employees want to disengage, and we have all this technology and constant connection that may actually motivate people to try to disengage from their coworkers due to the need to manage their attention and interruptions. So social media is very interactive. It allows for easier, quick interactions, constant status updates, but it can be very disruptive at the same time, getting all these constant notifications. And one strategy for managing that was so I should explain. Another way that these engineers used Skype chat was through a group chat format. They would open windows in Skype chat for every project they were working on, and they would keep a running tally of status updates. They would just update their coworkers on problems, bugs they had to fix, get advice on how to solve problems. And they kept the windows open, and they could quickly check in throughout the day and quickly scroll down, similar to like a news feed or a media stream on Facebook, where you can just quickly scroll down, read the status updates, get up to speed, but not have to get too involved in the conversation. And so the strategy was to monitor updates through triggered attending, where they would scroll down, and if a message triggered their attention and they knew they needed to get involved, they would participate in the conversation. Otherwise, they would just let it go. Particularly, the managers were very busy, so the VP of engineering said, Skype is great for having an interactive conversation where you don't need to give the person 100% of your attention. So they could engage while remaining disengaged. And I like this graphic here because it conveys connectedness and networks, but it also is sort of keeping people at arm's length. And the technology enabled people to do just that. The third tension that they negotiated was between sharing and control. And they did try to share knowledge, they valued knowledge sharing, but they also had some very real concerns about privacy of data, as well as their own job security. So on one hand, social media tools enabled lightweight knowledge sharing, but they were also subject to leaks, and there were real concerns about, is that my time? Okay, I'm almost done. So there were also concerns about, the excessive openness of these tools. So some of the responses were to limit access to particularly sensitive documents, such as their code, their specifications, and lock them down in a Google Docs group where they could really restrict the privacy settings to only those who needed to see the information. And then the job security concern, there were employees on the East Coast who were very concerned that their office was going to be shut down and they were going to be made redundant. So they were selective in the knowledge that they shared with the newer West Coast employees. So I'll just read the second quote here that says, if we're considered the remote site and then everybody knows how to do the things that we know how to do, then there's no reason for this site at all. So that those types of concerns limited the knowledge that was shared through social media. So just to wrap up, some key takeaways here are, I think it's important to take into account the excessive openness of enterprise social media tools and think about the implications that this may have internally on workplace communication, and notice that it may provoke resistance among certain types of workers, and that it may be used strategically rather than in a purely open knowledge-sharing way. And, I think there are some important ways that employees use enterprise social media strategically to share knowledge while also managing their time, attention, and workload. They're typically balancing multiple concerns that they have to attend to. When we want to understand enterprise social media use and adoption, I think we need to take into account contextual factors such as age, organizational culture, functional background. And managers and practitioners who are interested in promoting enterprise social media use need to realize and ensure that they align it with their culture, their goals, and their work. So thank you very much.
Hello, everybody. I would like to echo what's been said before, and that I'm really excited to be here today. I'm excited to be in a room full of like-minded individuals, and I'm really looking forward to getting the chance to talk informally at the breakout sessions later today. So I'm kind of building on what's been presented earlier, particularly by Dr. McCorkindale, by just looking at how organizations and stakeholders are connecting via social media. So I've done some research on that myself, so I'm going to talk a little bit about that today. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about how this connectivity can be used for good, so for pro-social reasons. So, and I'll give you the caveat that in an attempt to be fancy, I loaded a lot of animation into the presentation, so we'll just see how that goes today, right? So yeah, there might be some miscues, but hopefully you'll get the point. So we know that individuals use social media, and we know that organizations use social media. But what we know less about is whether the way organizations use social media is in tune or in sync with the way that individuals use social media. So there's this widespread belief in, I would say, public relations and social media-based research that having a social media platform is key, it's essential, it's the best way to reach stakeholders. And I would imagine that it's the same from a practitioner point of view. But there's not a lot of hard data that I have come across supporting this fact. So So the question remains as to whether stakeholders are using social media to interact with organizations in terms of an online brand presence, what they're using it for, and if so, are the efforts that the organization is putting out, are they actually effective at capturing the interest and, even more importantly, the actions of their stakeholders? So, as Dr. McCorkindale mentioned before, the ideal for communication and public relations is dialogic communication. So dialogic communication is the idea of facilitating like a two-way, mutually beneficial relationship between organizations and stakeholders. So through their dialogic theory of public relations, Taylor and Kent ascribed 5 communication strategies that are rooted in the affordances of social media. And they include the dialogic loop, so the ability for an organization and a stakeholder to actually engage in dialogue, usefulness of information. So does the platform provide useful information for the stakeholders, generation of return visitors. So once you visit it, as a stakeholder, once you visited an organizational platform, is there incentive for you to come back? So is there new and engaging content? Is there something that you're going to come back to view? You don't just take your information, run, and not engage again. Ease of interface, so is it easy to use? And conservation of visitors. So does the organization provide all of the necessary information among their online presence? So it doesn't just mean on their website, but do they provide useful links to other parts of their online presence as well? And so when utilized correctly, dialogic communication can lead to trust, identification with, and even social capital between organizations and stakeholders. However, when it's done incorrectly, it can make an organization seem fake and even disengaged. So, I conducted a survey with young adults ranging in ages from 18 to 24 to find out if and how they're interacting with brands online. So, are they interacting? Yes, they are. In fact, 100% of the participants reported following brands online using some form of social media. So, what kind of brands are they interacting with? What captures people's attention? So, these are ranked in the order that they were most frequently mentioned. So, products. Stakeholders are engaging with organizations that put out products that they enjoy, that they use on a regular basis. Schools, not surprising given the demographic that I surveyed. So stakeholders are interacting with schools online. Celebrities and also sports teams also rank high in terms of who stakeholders are engaging with. And then how are they engaging? So Facebook was ranked among the top app for engaging with organizations. YouTube ranked second, which surprised me. Mobile phone applications. So by that specifically, I was asking about if an organization or a brand has created an application. So if anybody has a Starbucks app on their phone, you use it when you go in, you pay. So not necessarily following Starbucks on Facebook on your phone, but using the actual mobile app that the organization created. And then Twitter was below that. So that really surprised me because I think there's also a widespread belief that Twitter is the #1 platform by which stakeholders and organizations engage. But at least for this sample, that was not the case. However, 3/4 of the respondents said that they use multiple media on a regular basis. So they don't just follow brands on one type of social media. They'll switch between several in terms of following them. So in terms of dialogic communication, so what is it that stakeholders are looking for when they engage with brands through social media? The #1 most important thing to the respondents was usefulness of information. Followed by that was conservation of visitors. So are they getting all of the information they need? Is there incentive for them to stay within the organization's social media platform? Followed by ease of use. And then after that, much lower, which again I found very surprising because with all the emphasis on transparency and dialogue, I would think dialogic loop or the opportunity to be heard or even customization, the idea that the organization is responding directly to me, I expected that that would rate among the top, but it didn't. So dialogic loop came in fourth, and then generation of return visitors or again, opportunities like is the content fresh, is it important that I have a reason to go back, was the least important. And I was surprised that only 61% of respondents said that it impacted their buying decisions. And so I think it goes back to what we heard this morning when we were hearing from Ms. Payne about what are the organization's goals for interacting with people through social media. Is it to improve their sales? Is it to build just a tribe of followers or people who engage and then share their message? What is the goal of organizations? So there was no way for me to glean that from the survey. So I would imagine, though, for a lot of organizations, impacting the buying decision of their stakeholders is a really important goal. So again, to see only 60% of people saying that social media use impacted their buying decision was interesting to me. So at first, I kind of correlated that with the idea that maybe organizations that these respondents were following, maybe they weren't using their social media platforms or their online platforms in the most effective way. But then I started to do more research, and my research kind of went in a different direction. And then I decided maybe that's not the goal of online interaction. Maybe stakeholders don't follow brands because they want to buy from them. Maybe they want to learn more about them. They want to immerse themselves in them. It's a lifestyle brand, so they want to live it. Or there could be other reasons too. So that got me thinking. If they're not buying, if we're not using social media to impact buying decisions, then what for? And a very pleasing and hopefully obvious answer is community building. So the idea of building communities between organizations and stakeholders. And so this goes right back to the idea of dialogic communication and building trust and relationships and social capital. So community building would then rest in the idea of trust being built through repeated interactions with the organization, which leads to increased connections. Hopefully, as people believe in and start to trust the brands, they're going to share the information, which leads to then social capital. And then once social capital is built, organizations have these communities or pockets of engaged people who can then act on initiatives outside of the traditional purchase my product or share my message, but maybe even get involved in the corporate social responsibility endeavors that the organization has. And essentially, when that transition is made, stakeholders have the opportunity to become citizen stakeholders. And a citizen stakeholder is someone who acts on the behest of an organization by furthering their cause for a pro-social reason. And building on that, it's the idea that once a stakeholder becomes involved and becomes a citizen stakeholder, they're going to tap into their own personal communities as well, therefore furthering the reach of the community, the reach of the organization, and the reach of whatever pro-social initiative that they're engaging in. So in a way, this rests on the combination of social capital and also socio-technical capital. So what is the capital that can be gained and gleaned, essentially similar to the affordances that Dr. Gibbs talked about in terms of social media and building capital? And so what this might look like are some endeavors that are already out there. So Tom's runs One for One, their One for One Foundation. So if you as a stakeholder purchase their shoes, they donate money towards drinking water, clean drinking water. Or if you purchase, and I'm going to mix up on the products, if you purchase one of their other products, they'll donate eyeglasses. So this idea that as a stakeholder, you engage with the organization, and then the organization does something pro-social. Similarly, Johnson & Johnson partners with Operation Smile, and they send both employees and money to partner with Operation Smile for fixing cleft palates of children. So you're essentially working at the behest of an organization, but to do pro-social work. So the two examples of Tom's and Johnson & Johnson don't necessarily build on social media other than the occasional, posting about it or tweet about it. People might individually do that. But there's another example called Change Heroes, which is a for-profit organization that rests completely on the idea of engaging people through social media to build schools or to take on a variety of efforts in third world countries. And so the basic premise of their model is they find someone who's interested, and then that person has to create content that's quick, that's easy to share, that's concise, and really taps into the idea of social capital. They create this video and then share it via social media with 33 of their friends, asking each of their 33 friends to donate $3.33 a day to this cause, and then create their own video and share it with 33 of their friends, and so on and so on and so on. And so through the idea of social media and tapping into each other's social and socio-technical capital, there's this idea that we can build communities of stakeholders in order to do good and actually become citizens in the meantime. So social media offers us ways to connect with people close and far, and it's kind of cracking open our concepts of engagement, connection, and community. And so these are concepts that are really rooted in our social psyche, and so they're not going to change overnight. However, I look forward through more social media endeavors to being part of this conversation and seeing where the future takes us. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to take a different approach, and I'm going to say I am not happy to be here. It's like rainy outside. My hair, I'm having like issues, so I had to pull it back because it's like really nasty out. So I could be at home, I could be at work. So hanging out with you guys, not really on my to-do. I'm really just kidding. I am so happy to be here. That was a joke. Don't about my bad hair. Don't say anything about my hair. Say I'm fabulous. Instagram. I am very excited to be here. I am thrilled to get, asked and have the opportunity to come today to present to you all. I was a little kind of nervous because I'm with my esteemed panel of academics, and I'm Dr. Boatner sounds nice. I aspire to that, but I don't have that yet. So I thought, what can I possibly say with all this research that's been done? So I'm going to give you a little bit of a business kind of perspective about social. So you've heard some amazing, and it's funny, I'm taking notes as they're all presenting, because I live this every day at IBM. So I'm going to give you all kind of a business perspective, but just some of the trends in how big data is really changing social media, and just to kind of give you just some insight and some outlook into unstructured data, structured data, some of the things that we've already talked about, the empowered consumer today, trends, I mean, just a number of things that I want to share with you. So again, taking a little bit of a different turn, there's no research. The research I've conducted was sitting at my desk in my office, on the phone with my colleagues, or taking a meeting. Like, there's my research. So, and you can tweet that, that's my research. No, I'm just kidding. So, looking at big data. So at IBM, big data is kind of like air. Like, we all breathe it. You all probably breathe it too, and you don't realize that you do, so I'm gonna tell you a little bit about it. But big data, it's everything. It's everything that we do, thanks to the social web. So I'm going to kind of tell a little story about history of unstructured data, structured data, and how the social web really was a game changer for that. So the world runs on data. Like, literally, the world is run by data, and data can either be created by people or technology. And you probably don't think about it because you're thinking about data just what we create. You all probably aren't thinking about data that, you know, data centers create. If anybody uses Google or Gmail, anybody have Gmail in here? So, right, everybody, right? So all that data for Gmail and the cloud, the technology, I mean, literally the world is like run by data. So it's either people generated or technology generated, and most of it is unstructured. So let me ask you before I get into who knows the difference between structured data and unstructured data? Just give me like a show of hands. Katie, you don't count. Of course you know. Of course. Who besides the guru on measurement of structured and unstructured data, who here knows the difference between the two? Okay, so a couple. If you guys didn't raise your hands, that means you don't know. And it's okay, there's no social shaming in here. Like, you don't know. Okay, it's fine. So structured data is like what we normally think of, like customer profile, a customer, you know, you live at 123 Main Street. Your name is like John Smith. You live in a single family home. You are, you know, it's like census data, right? Like just, you know, a customer, your medical records, that's structured data. Like, no one's not gonna make that up. Like, oh yeah, you're medical, you have like the blood type of an alien. Like, that's not, nobody makes that up. Like, you have like structured data, but it's mostly database data. That is like structured, like where you see Excel sheets of just nothing but content, and you fill it in, and payroll, and that's structured data, okay? Unstructured data, thanks to, again, the social web, is everything. Videos, emails, pictures, PDF documents, ebooks, right? Ebooks. Hello, 50 Shades was an ebook, right? Ebooks, right? So looking at all the different types of unstructured data, 80% of all digitally stored data, so again, digitally stored, so on the web, social web, digitally stored data is unstructured. 80%. Did you hear that? 80%. That, to me, as a digital communications professional, I'm like, that's awesome. Unstructured data is taking over the world. That's great. Some people might say, that's not so great, because how do you balance and organize your personal data, like I talked about with the structured data, and your, you know, whatever you share in a business sense from a corporation? How do you balance that if 80% of it is unstructured? How do you determine what I share for work, what I share for personal, what I do for work, what I do for personal? How do you organize that, right? So on one hand, yeah, that's great, 80% is unstructured. On the other hand, what do I do with that? How do I control that? What happens? Well, because 80% is unstructured data, thanks to the social web, all the tweets, all the Instagram photos, everything, this has created a shift in power among organizations, brands, we just mentioned that and talked about that, and the consumer, or you as the end user, or the person either creating the data, sharing the data, leaving a customer review, going to TripAdvisor to plan your vacation, whatever it is that you're doing, there's a shift in power. Now, the consumer, thank you, social media. We are like the superheroes. Welcome to the empowered consumer. We have more as a consumer, and a consumer of digital data and just data unstructured data in general, we have more power than we've ever had before. Ever. A 16-year-old in his basement can like ruin a company just by sending out a tweet to his followers to be like, hey, you know, Best Buy sucks. All right, all my friends, legions of 16-year-olds are gonna say Best Buy sucks, and Best Buy is gonna have to go on to Ask Best Buy and tweet and be like, oh my God, this 16-year-old said we suck. What are we gonna do? Like, it becomes like a thing. It happens every day, right? So we have all this power as consumers. And if you look at it, empowered by social media, mobile devices, customers expect enterprises to deliver a specific experience. Again, the research has shown, these lovely ladies have talked about this. There is no longer the attitude of the consumer to like, sell me. That's done, okay? That's over with, we're finished. The consumer, the power, the Superman now is serve me. Don't sell me. Serve me. I am the consumer. I am buying from you. I am liking you. I am whatever. Serve me. It's also show me. Anybody seen Jerry Maguire? Show me the money, right? Consumers, show me the money. I don't mean that in a sense like you're walking into a store being like, give me all your money. I don't mean that. I mean, show me what you're going to do for me. Any of us who like a brand or like a company or engage with a company or whatnot, it's because you either have some loyalty to that, you trust them, there's some credibility, but there's a reason why you like them. And I'm sorry, guys, we're human. It's like, what's in it for me? What are you gonna do for me, right? Show me, serve me. Also, tell me. Don't shove something down my throat and say, here you go. Like, I want you to tell me how this benefits. It's all about personalization. So we, as the consumer, thanks to all this unstructured data we are creating on the social web and our mobile devices, we expect certain things. Companies that are doing it well, I feel like my own company, IBM, but there are other companies who do a great job and there are other companies that miss the mark. Give you an example. I can't tell you how many times I've received a magazine in the mail or some type of product for a baby. Like a parenting magazine or like diapers. I have no children. I have never had children. I'm not married. I don't really particularly want children right now. So why am I getting magazines for parenting and Huggies in the mail? Did I go to a parenting site? Did I look at a video with like cute babies? Possibly, sure. I like to look at. There was a video of the dad like rubbing like a piece of toilet paper over his baby and the baby went to sleep. Did anybody see that? It was so cute, right? I could not stop looking at it because I'm like, oh my God, he goes to sleep. And then somebody else tried it with their baby and they didn't go to sleep. But I watched the video, right? Did maybe some of my data, as someone mentioned, unknowingly go to Huggies or Parenting Magazine because I watched a video about this baby on the toilet paper? Maybe, but I'm not the right audience, so why are you sending this to me? So again, certain companies get it right, but as a consumer, I expect wherever I shop, Nordstrom, wherever I shop, I expect them to get it right. I expect them to know what I buy. I am empowered, so this is what I want, and I would think that you all probably want the same thing. So how does big data and social, taking all this unstructured data, how do we analyze this so that companies will do better? Trust me, there's so much work that needs to be done. Another brand that I love that just missed the mark, JetBlue. I'll tell you if anybody wants to hear a story about JetBlue on the side, I fly to the same location. Like I go to the same place. Why are you giving me offers to Aruba? I go to the same place. It's a whole issue, but some people they miss the mark. So how can big data help us go from regular social media to conducting social media and doing what we do with social media strategy to now social intelligence, right? Taking all of this social media data, all this unstructured data, everything that the social connected web is creating, and turn into some actionable insights that companies, that brands, even consumers, you guys, that we can do. How do we do this? So if you look at just the overall definition of a social media strategy, it seeks to balance the message and the medium, right? The platform that you're delivering the message to a particular audience. That's a social media strategy. And you're either going to use Twitter to do that, you're going to use Facebook to do that. I mean, that's just the standard. But how do you take it a step further? I love when I get questions like, What's the next thing in social media? I have no idea, but I can tell you the next thing is going to be personalized. It's going to give me whatever I want whenever I want it. That's what I can tell you. What it is, no clue. What it's going to look like, maybe like an Instagram, Kick, Twitter hybrid, maybe. I don't know, but it will be personalized. So if you look at just kind of all the unstructured, you can see we're moving past the historical phase. Some of the research and things that we've talked about, share of voice, sentiment, we're moving past that. And now we're getting into what's trending, what's hot, what's not. Did you guys know that Twitter, through a program with the Annenberg School of Communications, they can determine if a movie is going to be a hit or not based on social conversations had on Twitter with a hashtag around a particular movie? Did you guys know that? No? No? Yes, some no? Way before the movie's released. So before it's released, people talk about it, critics, kind of review it. Rotten Tomatoes might get their hands on a copy. So it's before the movie's released. They can tell, Twitter can predict how much it's gonna make and if it's gonna, be a flop or not. I would love to know what they thought about Fast 7, given, Paul Walker's untimely death. It made a lot of money, but Twitter can predict those things. So now we're into trends. How social predicts trends. How do you take big data to predict trends? I'll tell you another trend. Did you know that when it rains, out like today, generally in the United States, people eat more cake than pie? Right? Who knew? I eat both. When it's raining and when it's sunny, I'll eat cake and pie. But when it's raining, can you believe that people eat more cake? Like who? Again, trends, social analysis, big data, unstructured data in social media will tell us that. Okay. Predictive modeling. Now I could get really technical with you all because I work at a tech company, but I'm not. But predictive modeling, let's just say for the fashion industry. Every year there is a Pantone color of the year. This year's color, everyone, is Marsala. It's like a deep plum, red. The guys are like, who cares about Marsala? Look around, fellas. Marsala's everywhere. In your lamps, the carpet, your girl's purse, a dress. It's everywhere. You probably might have some Marsala at home, fellas, and you didn't even know you did. But predictive modeling can, show, well, if the Pantone color is Marsala, what's the runway going to look like for Fashion Week? Or what furniture is going to be designed with Marsala? Do you know who follows Pantone colors? Black & Decker. Do you know why? Because they create a lot of their appliances based on the Pantone color. A Marsala blender, really? It's a thing. Yep, I see the face. It's a thing. They did it. But again, using social data, predictive modeling. And then finally, deep insights. You can use all of this analysis to create some very deep insights about consumers, about brands. Psychological goes far beyond what we know around psychographics. It gets really, really deep so you can have deep insights. So this is just to give you guys just an overview. I will leave you with just the last kind of statement of listen and learn with social. It's not just about how you execute. It's not just about the thumbs up. It's not just about the hashtags, even though the hashtags are very important. It's not just about that. Social analytics can pivot campaigns to specific segment, the time, the channel, the offer, what the customer wants, how they will promote it for you, and ultimately all of those things make money. Show me the money, going back to the show me the money. All of those things make money. So next time, whether you're looking at your social research, we're talking about engagement, credibility, think about how big data is a real game changer to deliver exactly what we want, when we want it, and how we want it. Thank you.
Well, I want to thank our presenters and for their insights in sort of locating our discussion, our overall discussion today in some very clear categories, which is really helpful, I think, for all of us. So let's open it up to questions. If you'd like to ask a question for anyone on the panel, just please step up to the mic so we can get your mellifluous tones over the microphone. Anyone have any questions? Come on up. I saw in the back, right here. I guess we'll do proximity, I guess.
Thanks for coming. So my question, I wrote it down because I have a terrible memory. How do you think social media has impacted the potential for success of entrepreneurial endeavors? Anyone?
I'll go ahead and I will try to answer that. My husband is an entrepreneur. He owns his own martial arts school. And so really just getting up, and so we are relying a lot on word of mouth. So I think it's pretty commonly known that traditional advertising or traditional marketing is not quite as effective as it used to be. And so we are trying to build ourselves as a community business, and therefore word of mouth within the community is huge for us. And so we haven't really gotten in depth with a lot of platforms, but he is really really focusing on Facebook to kind of tap into, to utilize the parents that we already have, getting them to share and getting them to engage other people to come in, and kind of just like running buddy promotions through that. And also instead of regular traditional advertising, going on different websites, and also trying to tap into our community has a lot of Facebook pages that parents are on. So we have the Proud Parents site for our township and stuff like that. And so just trying to harness the word of mouth potential. And so in many ways, I think that's one of the biggest things that social media has to offer, at least for small business. I know entrepreneurs come in a lot of different shapes and sizes, but for a small business that's looking to kind of grow around a community feel, the ability to share and also just kind of harness that word of mouth that comes with it. And because with that comes like the idea of transparency and a genuine, like people are only sharing information about our business because they like our business, so.
I would answer it really depends on whatever the endeavor is. And so for some, and it depends on the strategy of what you want to use it for, right? Is there really a market for what you're doing, and how can you do it? So I'll give you a couple examples of how stuff that worked. Koji Barbecue is a great food truck in Los Angeles, and they sort of made their mark with Twitter. Right? I mean, that was really the way that they built their business, being able to tell people where they were and use social media to get out there. If you've ever seen the movie Chef, it's very similar to that. If you haven't seen the movie Chef, it's a pretty good movie. There's also other cases, Blend Tech. I don't know if you've checked out the Blend Tech YouTube videos, but it's a guy who asked the question, will it blend? And his videos, he just sort of did them as a demonstration. And he started this YouTube channel, and some of his videos have 13 million views. So he will put iPads in a blender and put all sorts of by the way, it's a very upsetting video when you watch him put the iPad in the blender, and iPhones, but it works because it sells blenders, right? But I think it also depends. I mean, if you have an organization, if you're not able to manage it properly, if your market's not really using social and that's not really the target, then you have to find creative ways to break through the noise. But for me, just doing social for the sake of social isn't the best sort of policy.
Great panel, everyone. I'm speaking as a consumer, not an educator or not a former business person, but how or can we as consumers manage all this? I mean, I think there's is the intrusiveness of it versus the we want it when we want it when we want it. And what are your thoughts on that as consumers? How can we control the messages we're getting from brands?
So I think there are a number of ways to do that. I mean, and some of the social platforms have taken liberties to that. So you all know Twitter about a year and a half ago introduced the mute button on your news feed. So you could like mute if there's somebody who tweets that you follow that tweets like every 5 seconds and you didn't want it like clogging up your feed, you could like choose to mute them. Or you can set your settings to see if you're on LinkedIn and you're in a number of groups, or you follow LinkedIn Pulse, their news aggregator, you can limit, I want to see this once a week, right? As opposed to, I mean, I suffer from fear of being left out, so I don't want to not know something. So when something breaks on Twitter, like I want to know. When something happens, like I want to be in the know, so I have to, just kind of the opposite to that. I need to be engaged, because if somebody tells me, oh, did you hear about such and such, and I don't know, oh my gosh, it ruins my world. That's me as a digital communicator. I think a good way to balance as a consumer to kind of limit the noise is going to happen regardless, unless you just completely unplug and you lead a minimalist, or even, you just lead that life, then you won't have to worry about it. However, I think your customized settings in your social platforms, whichever ones you choose to engage, is a good way to limit that, using like the mute button, you know, on Twitter to kind of manage. And you determine kind of what types of information you want to consume. But even more importantly, you determine what you want to be known for. Like, what do you want to share? I tell anybody, if you follow me on any social platform, I am what I share. You know, I talk about social media, I talk about PR, I might occasionally talk about my favorite reality TV show. I try to limit that because it could go on for a really long time. But I am what I share. So if you determine this is how I want to engage on these platforms, you customize those settings so you're not getting bombarded with all of the, you know, all of the information, and you choose how you want to consume that. I think that's a good way to balance. There's no magic. I'm not going to tell you read this handbook and it will change your life. There is no social life coach, okay? Here's the social life coach. There's a social life coach. There's a social, it's you guys, right? You determine how you want to engage and how you want to consume. I hope that answered. I don't know if you guys agree.
What a great answer. Perfect.
We have another question from the back, yeah.
So I was just going to ask, thank you guys so much, by the way. When you were talking about engagement, so you said that organizations should engage with their stakeholders, you know, personally, one-on-one. So to what extent is that engagement expected to be personal? Because, you know, organizations, they have, you know, thousands of followers on social media platforms, or at least they hope to have thousands. So have you done any research from the stakeholders' perspective, how they expect the organizations to be personal with them?
I just want one more, because that's also my question. So how did you, maybe this question goes to Tina and pretty much everyone, and include Katie. So how did you also measure the engagement? Did you measure the engagement based on the likes and share and comments? And
Yeah, we used, there's an engagement scale, and I can't remember the author, but we used that. There's a whole series of what you did to engage. So some of it is like shares, and it's also, and then there's also other sort of external behaviors you do instead of engage. But yeah, so a lot of the research that I do is on engagement, and we just plug in that scale. Let's see. What were you asking? Say that one more time. I'm sorry. I just completely blanked out.
Sorry, maybe I interrupted that.
No, you're fine. The engagement. Right. The one-on-one. I think so. So some of the research I've done, especially on millennials and looking at engagement, I just want to say I don't think organizations should engage for the sake of engagement. There are times when you don't engage, and Brandy, I'm sure, gets this from IBM. There's some people that maybe you don't want to engage with, right? And that sort of is a policy. So everyone doesn't get the 5-star treatment. Because there are people who are not going to change your mind, and it could just escalate. And we saw that with the Bank of America bot issue from a couple Julys ago. Millennials expect organizations to respond to them personally. They have the expectation that you are going to reply to them if they have an issue or they say something. It's just sort of the expectation, and I feel like it's just will continue to increase. And that's why a lot of organizations do have pretty robust social media teams to be able to manage and reply to each individual customer, even if it's a kudos, right? I mean, they also, one of my students tweeted at TidyCat, I don't know why. It was just a joke, she was bored, and she said something about, TidyCat told a joke, and she replied and said, this joke is so fetch, who wrote it, a dog? And TidyCat replied, quit trying to make fetch work, Rhiannon, right? So she was like, oh my God, they talk to me like TidyCat. But she expected TidyCat to talk to her. Like if she's gonna talk to them and make a joke after their joke, she expected them to talk to them as well. So millennial research in general, people do have expectations that they will be addressed. As any sort of other channel, if you call on the phone, it's just sort of another channel where people can engage, or doing an online chat or things like that.
I have to stand.
Yeah.
Just real quickly, can you just name a couple of companies that you think really are getting the social media? You know, who's best in class? Who would you name?
Oh man, I mean, there's some of the airlines are pretty good. Whole Foods does a fantastic job of engaging. Ford does a pretty good job of engaging. There's others. I mean, Katie works with tons of clients who she could probably tell you does a fantastic job engaging. But usually it's the big ones. And there is a tie between the most admired companies and how well they engage on social media.
But also like brands like Victoria's Secrets. Victoria's Secrets, just from a sales revenue, their revenue keeps growing. When in a time where a lot of other companies, their revenue is declining, yet Victoria's Secrets continues to grow. But I think a lot of that is not only are they omni-channel, so they're everywhere, their Facebook page, they have the fashion shows, they have an app, they have a number of things, but going back to this point of engagement, whether it's the catalog, their sale, a commercial, one of these angels, whatever. Like they have angels like answering questions on Facebook. So Adam Levine from Maroon 5, his wife is an angel. She like answered a bunch of questions. You can imagine what that did for what's it like being married to Adam Levine as opposed to what's it like being an angel. But that's a really good, and they're a great example to show how their social engagement being omni-channel continues to sell their product. I would love to know who their digital person is because I want to commend them that they've been able to use a variety of platforms to keep driving business. And you can be like, well, it's bra and panties, and so what? They obviously their formula works. What are you doing? Tell me so we can do it. No, but that's Victoria's Secret's for me is a good example.
Discover's another good example. They have what they do, which is really, really smart, credit card company. They will send out $5 gift cards to their card holders. And they send them to your house. You don't know it's coming. It lands in the mail. You open up a card, and it has #DiscoverJoy. So you tweet, "Thank you, Discover Joy, for my gift card. $5. It's $5, right?" Which is, I mean, to get that sort of personalization and sort of brand generation and promotion is amazing. So you may go to whatever platform you use and share it to your friends. And they respond. So Discover did not have a relationship with Apple Pay. They responded to their clients who complained that they are in talks with Apple Pay. So not only the transparency, but using it as sort of an information platform as well.
We have time for 2 more questions, and then I'd like us to go down I think there's coffee downstairs and some other things, and we'll go down for the, yes, and we'll go down for the breakout session. So 2 more.
Going back to us as our own social media coach or social coach, whatever you said, and is your finger on the pulse at all what the FCC is getting ready to do or talking about doing regarding internet and social media and a crackdown of some sort?
I mean, I hear with net neutrality, I hear about the crackdowns. I specifically don't focus so much on regulatory issues unless it's a security concern, right? Security with the social web, who has my data, where is my data going, the breaches, that I have my finger on the pulse on. But when I hear things about like net neutrality or about what the FCC is doing, I honestly don't pay attention, not because I'm like, oh, I don't care, I don't want to know. But I feel like when it gets to the point where the government starts trying to regulate social, then I'll pay attention. It's almost like taxes. It's like I have to do it on April 15th because I have to. But it's not like I sit around all year being like, man, I can't wait to file my taxes. So when I need to pay attention to the FCC crackdown, and I say that in quotes because I don't even know what that means, then I will. But generally, my regulatory concerns lie within the voice of the customer. That's for me.
No other thoughts on that?
Okay.
First, I wanted to thank you for having this forum because this is excellent. I think there should be more of them, more of these forums. And my question, maybe I might be throwing a little wrench in here, but my question is, I talked to, actually, I think her name is Julia downstairs, and they gave a presentation as well. I think you were part of the presentation that was downstairs about social, enterprise social technology, social media. We're a technology company, and we do a lot of social, I guess, what we call social technology. We don't call it social media, and I think even IBM, Microsoft has adopted that term, and we've adopted that term too because it encompasses everything, not just the front end of social media. It encompasses the IT side, the data structure side, which we are very, very big on, which is very important, and that's the way our company has directed it. I didn't see much talk about that here in this forum. And it's not just about the technology, but how to put it all together and how to make it work in the back end. Because that's the force. I think that's the driving piece and the piece that's going to break out. That's why I thought that was a great opening presentation, I think, that I saw downstairs, because I think that's the future of where we're going with social media is there. And that's the focus of it. So I wanted to see, the segue there is to the question is, what do you think about the back-end technology and how much have you dealt with it? I'm sure on the IBM side you have very much so, but how have you dealt with the social technology part of what you do?
Well, I'll answer. I'm a communication scholar, so I'm primarily interested in people and how they use the technology and kind of the social impacts of the technology and how it affects their collaboration and communication. So I don't have a technical background to really be looking at the back end as much. We do have scholars in our information science department who work with big data methods to deal with kind of how do you analyze the data on the back end, and I think that's really interesting. And as social scientists, we're kind of trying to develop more collaborations between like the social scientists and the technologists to try to work with this kind of data, because I think social media applications really provide a lot of opportunities to understand, behavioral data like through these tools. So I don't really know if I have I haven't looked at that personally, except for working in interdisciplinary teams, research teams, where, we do have some other studies where we've used like server log analysis and tried to work with data more directly from the social media tools.
Yeah, and for me, so at IBM, I work in our technology services business, so I am infrastructure. So I actually can tell you, and probably if we could talk, offline, I can tell you all the back end that goes into it, because actually our IT department, our budget is getting to be more than our marketing budget, specifically for social, because of cloud and security, right? Because it's great to do all these wonderful things on social tools, but is it secure or is it not? Everyone says, people think security is a process problem or a technology problem. Security is a people problem. Someone clicks the wrong button, someone does the wrong thing. So if your infrastructure isn't set up where you have the security controls in place, if you have a BC management in case like you all, disaster happens, something happens, disrupts business, your recovery time, where does your data live? I can give you all of the infrastructure behind social, particularly with managed mobile services with your phone, right? Your phone, Jesus, being a BYOD shop, we could be here for hours talking about how to make that secure, how do you make everybody in it? I mean, all the broadband concerns, we have 445,000 people. Think about our CIO's office, what they deal with, right? In 170 countries. That's crazy. So if the infrastructure behind all that is, powered by social is something that you or others are interested in, maybe for future summits, that could be something that could, we could address. But I mean, we could have a very serious infrastructure, database, data center, cloud conversation if you would like to have that conversation. Right? I just read certainly could have here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ebony, and I'm a marketing student here at William Patterson. And my question's for Brandy. Could you share some of your journey on becoming a digital experience marketer? I'm graduating, and I'm sure a lot of students here would like to have some advice, and also from the rest of the panel. Is there any advice that you can give students who are trying to break into the social industry and what they could do to better their resume or to make them stand out amongst other applicants?
No, this is great, Ebony. I got this question earlier today, so it is a hot button question. But I ended up doing what I'm doing just because I noticed when social media kind of emerged 7 or 8 years ago that was the field I wanted. That was like my niche in PR. So I was a PR student, then I went to get my master's, continuing in PR, digital. So that's how I ended up. I had no technology background, so please understand I can talk a really good game now, but 5 years ago I was like, I'm gonna do fashion, I'm gonna be a celebrity. That's the kind of thing I wanted to do, because I'm fabulous. I was like, let's just be fabulous and get paid to be fabulous. But with that being said, now that I work at a tech company, I've learned so many other things. So my journey was a little different, but I will say I'm a good writer. So I was mentioning that writing skills, essential. That will differentiate you. But then Ebony, I don't know you, but you're here, so I know you're probably very serious about your career and your professional development because you're here. So you have to determine, what do you want to be known for? What areas of the business do you want to go into? Do you like healthcare? Do you like finance? I mean, we've talked about with the case studies that the panel has, discussed. We've talked about various companies. You need to decide, well, what do you want to do? But I think everything that we've talked about, engagement, transparency, big data, how you can help a company, or how you as an asset graduating can help a company continue to drive their mission, to make money, all of those things, that's what differentiates you. Don't be the 1,000th resume that reads the same as everybody else's, that has like these fluffy statements. I'm a real go-getter. I love people. I'm a people person. I really like to plan parties, and I'm really good at events. Don't do that. That drives me insane. But if you're like, well, at William Patterson, I increased our influence and share of voice by 30% from year to year, given the time I was at, I'd be like, whoa, what did she do? Throw some numbers in there. Don't use buzzwords like, I'm really flexible, I'm a fast learner. That's not gonna get it done. So establish what your brand is, what you wanna be known for, and show some like demonstrable, measurable results. Not, I helped plan this really great party at WPU, it's awesome. Don't do that, okay? You're welcome.
I would just add to that, to have a smart online presence. So not only to have an online presence, but to have a smart one that shows that you have a voice, that you have a brand, that you can write. So one thing I encourage everybody to do is to create an online portfolio that brands you. And so that way when you send out your resume, you can put the link to your online portfolio, and then people get a real taste of who you are before you come in. And if you promote yourself correctly in that way, that will help set you apart as well. And also, if you, again, just showing your voice, if you were to start a blog, even if it's not a professional blog, but if it's something that you're passionate about and you're interested in, and you can have like communication that has value, it shows that you can handle social media, you can handle voice. So I think stuff like that will set you apart as well.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. Thank you for our, okay.